Introduction. Welcome to Rise and Fall of Superpowers. I'm Dr. Joseph Hughes, Professor of Classical Languages at Missouri State University. I'm your instructor in this course. Because this course, Rise and Fall of Superpowers, is delivered via CD-ROM, you'll get to know me primarily as a disembodied voice coming out of your computer speakers, for which I apologize. The first thing I want you as my student to know is that I am personally committed to your success in this class. If you have any questions or problems about any aspect of this class, the course delivery method, your grade in the course, or technical problems, I'm there to discuss them. It's as easy as clicking on my website at imperium.missouristate.edu, which is located a little bit down to the left and under my left foot. I can always be reached during my posted office hours, which can be found out from the website. I can always be contacted via telephone, which is listed on the website. And I can be emailed at the email address listed on my website, which is, again, right down there somewhere. A thank you for taking Rise and Fall of Superpowers. I hope you have an enjoyable and educational experience. I know I've really enjoyed putting this course together, and I hope you like it. In keeping with Missouri State University's statewide mission in public affairs, Rise and Fall of Superpowers provides an integrated, interdisciplinary approach to a public affairs issue from a culture-society viewpoint. What does that mean? It means that we will work toward the following four goals. 1, to better appreciate America's roles and responsibilities as a superpower through study of two other great historical superpowers, the Roman Empire and the Russian Empire/Soviet Union. 2, to better appreciate the rights, roles, and responsibilities of American citizens by examining the rights, roles, and responsibilities for citizens in the Roman Empire and during the Russian Empire/Soviet Union. 3, to better appreciate the balance between civilian authority and military power in the United States by examining how this balance was maintained and sometimes not maintained in the Roman Empire and the Russian Empire/Soviet Union. 4, to develop further the ability to assess information sources critically, to formulate one's own opinions clearly, and to express these opinions in public strongly, forcefully, but also politely. The segments will include Segment 1B, How the Course Works. You'll get a better idea of what's contained on the CD-ROMs, and you'll get an idea of how these CD-ROM materials contribute towards achieving the course goals I've just mentioned. Segment 1C is called The Importance of History. It will explain and justify the methodology I have utilized in developing this course. Segment 1D, Some Helpful Buzzwords, will introduce some of the terminology which will be used over and over again throughout Rise and Fall of Superpowers. In Segment 1E, Conclusions, you will get your instructor's take on how Rise and Fall of the Superpowers fits in with Missouri State University's statewide mission in public affairs. Segment 1B, How the Course Works. What's on the CD-ROMs? This course is divided into 6 units: America, 1500 through 1865, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and America, 1865 to present. Each unit contains 5 lectures, which makes a grand total of 30 lectures. Each of these units has its own compact disc. Each of these 30 lectures, this lecture included, has the following. Segment A, a formal introduction outlining the lecture's themes and establishing the objectives for each lecture. 3 segments, which are B, C, and D, each of which addresses one or more of the lecture's major themes. And finally, Segment E, a formal conclusion, which sums up the lecture and highlights major points. Testing and grading. There will be 3-hour examinations over the course of the semester. Each will be worth 30% of your final grade. Hour Exam 1 will cover Unit 1, America, 1500 to 1865, and Unit 2, the Roman Republic, that is, the material on your first 2 compact discs. Hour Exam 2 will cover Unit 3, the Roman Empire, and Unit 4, the Russian Empire. These are the materials on your 3rd and 4th compact discs. Finally, Hour Exam 3 will cover Unit 5, the Soviet Union, and Unit 6, America, 1865 to the present. This is the material covered on your 5th and 6th compact discs. Each of the 3-hour examinations will be worth 100 points. 65 to 70% of the score will be based on objective questions, identification, short answer, and some matching. 30 to 35% will be based on the essay question. Each of these 3-hour examinations will focus primarily, but not totally, on the 2 units indicated. But you can expect important material and important concepts from the previous lectures to reappear. For example, I introduced the term imperium in Unit 1 and fully discuss it in Unit 2. I've named my World Wide Web server after the word imperium. You're going to be seeing this term imperium throughout the balance of the course. The last 10% of your final grade will come from your written project. Your written project will be a position piece in which you express your view of the United States' future in light of the materials in this class, the rise and fall of superpowers. Your grades on the exams and on the written project will be posted on the university's Blackboard site. It's essential that you register. If you have any questions about a grade you received or about the grading of your work in general, please bring it to my attention as soon as possible and we will work it out. Responsibilities of the student. For each of the 6 units, you are required to master the materials covered in the lectures, along with any other reading or other assignments indicated on the syllabus. Although there are lecture transcripts available from the website, you are strongly advised against relying only on the transcripts. I think the transcripts are right over there. The lectures themselves, which I encourage you to watch, are important because, 1, you get to see my smiling face, and number 2, because we have put together graphics and textual elements that will greatly enhance your learning experience and benefit your grade. This course is not an exercise in trying to read the instructor's mind. My wife would tell you there's really no point in trying. My hope is that you will master the material well enough to perform well on the exams and do a good job on the final project. If so, you will get a good grade in this course. Important terms and important concepts are stressed and repeated ad infinitum and ad nauseam. I've been teaching college now for 25 years at this taping, and I've been called some pretty mean things, some of which are true. But I have never been one of those professors who expects students to guess what's important enough from the course to really put time into learning. I've had professors like that. You've had professors like that. Catch me acting like that, drag me out and shoot me. I will always offer you on the test a choice between 2 essay questions. In the study guide and review materials, I give 3 possible essay questions for every unit. If you prepare 2 of the 3 essay questions, you're guaranteed that one of those essay questions will show up on your test. Have at it. I want to stress, too, that this course is not an exercise in parroting the instructor, that's me, in my opinions. Like any responsible American citizen, I have developed a set of political beliefs and I re-examine them constantly. I don't try to hide my personal political beliefs, and I don't think you should either. I pride myself on not forcing my personal viewpoints down my students' throats. I had that kind of professor too, and I didn't enjoy it very much. If you emerge from rise and fall of superpowers determined to cancel out my vote in every election for the rest of my life, my personal take on it is at least you're going to vote. The most important thing in this class is to form rational opinions about the class materials. Examine your beliefs critically and express your beliefs politically, firmly, but politely. If you have differences from anything you hear me saying in this class, read me saying in this class, or implying, please address these differences in your essay questions. Please address these in your written project. If that's not enough, come on up to my office. My office hours are on the website somewhere down there. Come on up and we'll talk about it. If you can't come up during my office hours, I'll make an appointment, regardless of whether or not I agree with your opinions. Your work will receive a fair reading, and I'll be happy to hear you out. You may even convince me. If your work is also based on critically assessed facts, strongly argued and politely expressed, you may even receive a very good grade. Segment 1C, the importance of history. 2 or 3 summers ago, my dad came down from Wisconsin to spend the week with us. We were having breakfast at a local restaurant I won't name. The waitress brought me out a stack of 3 pancakes, and I got down to business. I should point out here that I have a system for eating pancakes. I started by lifting up the top 2 pancakes and buttering the bottom pancake. What I do is I lift up the top 2 pancakes, put all sorts of butter on the bottom pancake, flip down the second pancake on top of that, and put all the butter I can possibly get over there. Finally, I take the top pancake, cover it with butter as much as I can get on there, and then I drown the whole thing in syrup, like so. And when my dad saw me performing this operation, he just busted out laughing. I asked him why. He said, "That's exactly the way that your mother always had to eat her pancakes." I have to confess that in the 42 years I spent on this planet with my mom, I'd never once thought of my mom as a pancake eater. Over the years, I'm sure I've eaten hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pancakes that Mom fixed me, but I can't honestly ever recall watching my mom eat a pancake. I mean, that's how it's supposed to be. Moms make pancakes and the kids eat the pancakes. I'm also sure that Mom never taught me how to eat pancakes the way she taught me to tie my shoes, or the way she taught me how to drive a car, or how to pick out presents for my wife. Still, each and every time I eat pancakes, I have to perform this operation on the pancakes. And the only way I can explain this is because I can't help behaving like my mother's son. In much the same way, we can say that a nation often behaves the way it does because it can't help factors such as its own ancestry, geographical location, and history. The colonists who founded the United States of America were mostly descended from white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. These ancestors had come to the different colonies for various reasons, but almost always of their own free will. Some of them, granted, did come as indentured servants. Some of them had been brought against their will from Africa to serve as human slaves. Some of the first Americans' ancestors had in fact lived in North America for centuries, the Indians. From the early 1800s on, people from around the world poured into the United States to become Americans, throwing their stock into the great American melting pot. We live today in an America which rightly celebrates and nurtures its diversity. But we can't help the fact that our nation was founded by a very undiverse group of Anglo-Saxon males who had very specific ideas. Some of these ideas were pretty awful ideas. The tolerance of human slavery was awful. The absence of women's rights, stupid. The belief that blacks and Indians weren't human, that's just repulsive. And we're still fighting the consequences of these wrongs today. But by far, the greater part of our founders' ideas were miraculously constructive, were wonderfully valid. America is the first great experiment in government that actually worked as it was designed. The United States did not always extend from sea to shining sea. As originally founded, America's western boundary was actually the Mississippi River. Canada was to the north, Spanish Florida to the south, and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. Unsurprisingly, for a nation of immigrants, the American people was restless. Even before the American Revolution, colonists looking for new land defied British laws and settled on the west side of the Allegheny Mountains. Sometimes America extended its boundaries by purchase, sometimes via diplomacy, sometimes through the use of raw force. The United States was pretty much given a free hand in this process because North America was too far away from Europe for the British, the Spanish, and the French to have any real clout here. Americans began to see the United States as having a sort of manifest destiny to civilize, quote-unquote, North America. But that definition of civilized remains open to question. More than anything else, the American Civil War arose from a dispute over whether the new territories to the west would become free states or slaveholding states. Once slavery was abolished and the Union was restored, then the Indians bore the brunt of America's drive westward. And once the western frontier closed down in the 1890s, America began to look beyond its traditional boundaries. And all of this, and the things we did as a result, as a nation, make up some of the cultural baggage we carry as Americans. Important as it is to understand who we were as Americans, before we understand who we are as Americans, we do tend to have a fuzzy sense of our nation's history. Part of the problem is the time factor. Although I am old and bald and graying, I'm not old enough to remember the American Revolution. Even my dad wasn't alive during the American Revolution. Actually, all of my ancestors were in either Great Britain or Poland around the time of the American Revolution. Neither side of my family made it to the U.S. until the 1850s. Once my ancestors arrived, though, they willingly became Americans, shouldering all the cultural baggage that I have indicated just above. Another problem is that a historical fact can be, and often is, presented believably with two completely different messages. For example, as a kid growing up in Wisconsin, I was taught that the Civil War was fought because the northern states wanted to free the slaves and the southerners wanted to keep them in bondage. My wife, growing up in Tennessee, was taught that the Civil War happened because the people of the South were tired of a bunch of Yankee abolitionists telling them how to live. The truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere in between. Slave owners were a minority in the South, as abolitionists were in the North. The real source of the war was the founders' unwillingness to confront the question head-on when they were drafting the Constitution. Had they dealt with slavery right up front, we might have been spared the Civil War. Our nation's history is full of cases like this. If we really want to understand ourselves as a nation, We have to set aside, if just for one day, what we were told or taught to believe and re-examine critically what happened and why it happened. Some people, myself included, love the study of history for its own sake, reading it, discussing it, and even writing about it. And God help me trying to teach it. A quarter century of teaching college has taught me that most students aren't as crazy about history as I am. Some students may even feel about history the way I have always felt about math, a cruel and refined type of torment. But a historical appreciation of America's role in the world is not merely optional today. The United States is literally making history every single day, which means that you and I are literally living history every single day. Moreover, if we are to practice the involved citizenship described by Missouri State's statewide public affairs mission, our own actions, our own decisions contribute to this history. We owe it to our nation and we owe it to ourselves to enter this process of involved citizenship with the best preparation we can acquire. As you've no doubt discovered during your time at Missouri State, involved citizenship is a complex process. It involves the study of many different disciplines and the comparison of many different viewpoints. My bias is likely showing here, but I see the study of history as the cornerstone of this process, the cornerstone of this preparation. Now, when I order pancakes for breakfast, I order just one. I'm not as young as I used to be, and I have heart disease running on both sides of my family. I take my cholesterol meds, which is no problem. I work out regularly, which is a pain in various parts of my anatomy. It's sad that I have to cut back on my pancake eating, but family history indicates that this is a worthwhile change. At least I can butter the living daylights out of the one pancake I am still allowed to eat, and I can still just drown that thing in syrup until it screams for mercy, the way that God and my mom intended for pancakes to be eaten. Segment 01D, some helpful buzzwords. Empire and imperium. The Latin verb impero means I command. Its meaning is as strong in Latin as it is in English. For example, you need my GEP 397 class in order to receive a degree from Missouri State University. You don't pass my GEP 397 class unless I inform university records that you have passed it. Even so, I don't give you commands. I give you lectures, reading assignments, I assign you essays, I give you tests, but I don't command you to do anything. My wife suggests that I take out the garbage, or she asks me to take out the garbage, or she tells me to take out the garbage, but she never commands me to take out the garbage. And I, of course, would never command my wife to do anything. For most people, if you need to give commands, you need a dog. Sit, Eefy. If I say that to our older female dog, she'll sit. If I say, sit, Yongi, he might sit, he might not, but, he means well. Of course, you can also give commands to a cat, but the cat will merely laugh at you. On the other hand, you can receive commands from a commander. A commander tends to have a first name like Sir, Ma'am, Your Highness, or Lord. A commander doesn't ask you to do something, or advise you to do something, or request that you do something. A commander tells you what you are going to do, and you do it, or else. During the Roman monarchy, from 753 BC to 509 BC, the Roman king automatically possessed imperium, the right to command total obedience from anyone, for any reason whatsoever. If the Roman king's command was not obeyed, he could punish his disobedient subject however he wanted to. Imperium also gave the Roman king the right to command troops in battle or to interpret the law, which commanded everyone. This was an awful lot of power for one person to have, even in ancient Rome, and it was not always used wisely. After the Romans traded their monarchy for a republic in 509 BC, the imperium was always held by at least 2 officials at one time. By the time of Christ, Rome had become the greatest power in the known world. The term imperium had taken on an additional meaning. The term Imperium Romanum now described both Roman power and Roman space, as applied to all of the lands where Rome herself held imperium. Let me use it in a sentence. Within the Imperium Romanum, a physical space roughly resembling the Mediterranean world, the Imperium Romanum, the power of the Roman government as wielded by the emperor, is supreme. Rome had the right to command anybody to do whatever Rome wanted or else. And here is where we get our term empire. Land inhabited by people who may or may not look like us, may or may not speak our language, may or may not like us very much, but they have to do what we say because we have imperium over them. Imperator and emperor. The term emperor is derived from the Latin noun imperator, which is derived from the verb impero, meaning to command. But it's got a rather wider sense of meaning. To the Romans, an imperator was not just a commander wielding imperium, because a Roman had to possess imperium in order to command an army. Instead, the title imperator was reserved for a successful commander who had won a particularly important battle. After winning this battle, the imperator could return to Rome and apply to the Senate for a triumph. A long parade through the streets of Rome, full of cheering onlookers, with his troops marching ahead of him singing dirty old war songs, and an opportunity to lay down his imperium, his command, right there in the Roman Forum. This was the greatest thing a Roman could hope to accomplish with imperium. To rule the Imperium Romanum effectively, the Roman Empire, Augustus Caesar had, by the time of Christ, started something called the Principate. The Principate was basically one-man rule cloaked in the window dressing, the facade, if you will, of the Republic. Augustus didn't dare call himself king or anything like that because he didn't want to become a human pincushion like his late uncle, Julius Caesar. Instead, Augustus settled for making the title imperator a part of his legal name. From that time on, whoever ran the Imperium Romanum, the Roman Empire, automatically held the term imperator. But imperator still meant more than the guy in charge of the empire. The term imperator implied that the guy who was in charge of the empire was also a skilled and accomplished military commander, just as with the modern term emperor. Up until the turn of the 20th century, the world still boasted real live emperors, such as Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, and Hirohito of Japan. But even after these emperors passed from the scene, empires remained. The German, Russian, and Ottoman empires all disintegrated thanks to the First World War of 1914 to 1918. The German Empire came back temporarily as Adolf Hitler's Third Reich, 1933 to 1945, and the Russian Empire reemerged as the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1991. The Japanese, French, Dutch, and for the most part the British empires disintegrated after the Second World War from 1939 to 1945. In the wake of the Second World War, the world became divided into two blocks, or sides, or teams, or cliques, or factions, or whatever. One, the United States and its allies, also known as the West, the Western Bloc, NATO, or the bourgeois imperialist warmongers. Number two, the Soviet Union and its allies, sometimes including Red China, but usually not, also known as the East, or the Warsaw Pact, or the Eastern Bloc, or as the godless commie imperialists. Notice that the word imperialist is not really a term of endearment here. By the 20th century, the term empire had become a synonym for a system designed to oppress poor subject peoples and nations for the benefit of a rich, warmongering elite in Moscow, London, Paris, Tokyo, Berlin, or even Washington, D.C. Peacemakers and imperialists. Of course, the folks in Moscow, London, Paris, Tokyo, Berlin, and Washington, D.C. have historically tended to see it otherwise. One of the strongest arguments for acquiring and maintaining an empire has been the need to maintain world peace. The Roman Principate, devised by Augustus Caesar in the days of Christ, set a precedent by maintaining peace in the Mediterranean world for more than 250 years, from 31 BC to 235 AD. This peace is called the so-called Pax Romana, Roman peace, or even Pax Augustana, Augustus's peace. Some of Augustus's later successors even worked on the notion that they, the emperors, had been put on earth to serve the inhabitants of the Imperium Romanum, indeed the interests of the whole human race. Other successors were not as high-minded. Marcus Aurelius' son and successor, Commodus, 180 to 192 AD, among other fascinating things, officially decreed that he was Hercules. All in all, the Pax Romana had been a good thing for Western civilization, so various attempts were made to replicate it, do it over again, bring it back for centuries. Yet as the 19th century merged into the 20th century, we find empire meaning something completely different. The great powers of the day, including Britain, France, Spain, Germany, Russia, the United States, were all trying to grab onto and hang on to and exploit financially as much territory as they could get. These powers made a pretense of civilizing their new territories, but for the most part, these nations grabbed new territory because they could, and it was there. The acquisition of an empire for empire's sake became known as imperialism. The terms imperialism and imperialist were new, but the concept, as we will see, was not new. The U.S. and its allies called the Soviets and their allies imperialists, and vice versa. And to a certain extent, both sides were right. Manifest destiny and nationalism. Another justification for empire is when a nation considers itself divinely or historically destined to achieve greatness. The term I will use in this class is manifest destiny, invented in the 1840s to justify the United States' westward expansion into territory held by Mexico, Great Britain, and Russia. Of course, most nations, however bad they have it, believe that God or the gods are strongly in their corner. The most rabidly atheist nations in history, the Soviet Union and Red China, have believed just as firmly that history, as interpreted by Karl Marx and his intellectual heirs, is strongly in their corner. Often, this big nation needs more natural resources to fulfill its destiny, or it needs more room for its growing population, or it needs both. The nation's manifest destiny becomes an excuse to acquire and rule territory, whatever the cost. Land which belonged either to nobody or to nobody civilized was regarded as quote-unquote terra nullius, nobody's land, and could be taken at will. Sometimes another nation claimed possession of the terra nullius, and then they had to fight to see who got it. An important part of manifest destiny is nationalism. Nationalism holds that human civilization can be broken up into units called nations, which basically consists of people having a similar origin and a similar unifying culture. Supposedly, each nation should have its own state. This is, in fact, the rule today. The United States is home to the American nation. Russia is home to the Russian nation, so on, or at least theoretically. The Soviet Union was a nation only to the extent that it was unified by communism. In 1991, it collapsed when various nations like Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, Latvia, and so on seceded from it. The remainder of the Soviet Union now calls itself the Russian Federation, even though the Russian Federation considers itself representative of a Russian nation. It still incorporates a number of non-Russian people speaking non-Russian languages in their non-Russian cultures. Just what is a nation? Hard to say sometimes. Nationalism claims particular virtues for a given nation and assumes particular responsibilities. Rome believed it had a mission to civilize the world. Russia believed it had a mission to civilize the world, as did the Soviet Union, as does the United States, at least sometimes. I personally would say that nationalism is basically a neutral concept. Nationalistic arguments have started countless wars in the past, and they will continue to do so. They have also, however, nationalist beliefs have also held nations together. I take great pride in being a member of the American nation, even if I don't agree with everything the American nation has done. I will say that the extreme form of nationalism is extremely bad. Once a nation really believes it has the obligation to civilize the world, this is historically a sign that the nation is going to fall on some very hard times. Not only is civilizing the world an expensive and bloody process, there's no guarantee that the rest of the world really wants to be civilized anyway. I am the Queen of England. I like to sing and dance, and if you do not like it, I will punch you in the pants. Okay. Segment 1E, Conclusions. I'm a child of the Cold War generation. I grew up on the side of the world populated by the good guys who followed America's quest for peace, prosperity, and freedom. I was taught to fear and loathe the bad guys on the opposite side of the world who fought alongside the Soviet Union to bankrupt and bring down free, peace-loving people like us and our friends. The gym of every school I ever attended as a kid was also designed as a fallout shelter. I was instructed in the proper technique for diving under my desk and covering my head just in case those crazy Russians dropped an H-bomb on Carrollton Elementary School in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. I was ready. As the 1970s rolled around, I came to see the Cold War more as a struggle between governments than a struggle between good guys and bad guys. I heard some of the awful things that the Soviet Union and the communist bloc was saying about us, and it wasn't true, and it wasn't fair. I discovered that the Soviet government was just as awful as advertised, possibly more so. But the more I read about the people who lived on the other side of the world, the people of the Soviet Union seemed to be more and more to be people just like us, doing the best that they could to make their own life more pleasant and tolerable under some very difficult circumstances. As I learned more about American politics and America's role in world affairs, this was as I was in high school, I became more skeptical about American government. I graduated from high school in 1978 in what some have called the age of malaise. Malaise being a term for just all around bad, unhappy, sad times. The Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, the hostage situation in Iran, the energy crisis in which gasoline actually hit the unheard of price of $1 a gallon. These events made it very hard for me to assume automatically that the U.S. government was right in all cases, ethical in all cases, or even competent. By the time the Soviet Union started falling apart, by the time that the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, I was a professor of classical languages. In fact, I was in my second year of teaching Latin and ancient Greek at what was then called Southwest Missouri State University. My intellectual life was pretty much focused on my academic career, my teaching, which has always come first, and my scholarship on ancient Roman oratory. I was also kind of pursuing a young instructor in the English department who is now my loving and beautiful and adored wife, Lisa. I kind of dropped the ball when I didn't notice the evil empire of my youth disintegrate before the world's very eyes. And even when I did pay attention to the Berlin Wall coming down and the implosion of the Soviet Union, I took a scholarly interest in comparing the Soviet world's fall to that of the Roman Empire. I was not one of those, however, who took a big victory lap over the death of communism. I knew enough history to know that what goes around comes around. Nor was I convinced by those theorists like Francis Fukuyama, who boldly claimed that history as we knew it had ended, the good guys had won, and now we're just going to tweak everything. Somehow I suspected that the world had not, in fact, begun an unstoppable march to democracy, capitalism, and all-around happiness. Not that I had any clue about what would happen to mess all of this up. I just believe that history, as anybody knows, it will never be over. In fact, I've pointed this out a few times already. You and I are living in history. We are a part of history. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 provide the proof. Reasonable people may disagree about what changed on 9/11/2001. People may disagree about what to do about these changes. But we can all agree that America will never be the same. And our trajectory of our nation has been changed. As I speak these words in the spring of 2007, these attacks are more than 5 years in our past. America is still struggling with the causes of these attacks and all of their consequences. I'm confident that our nation, which I love, the United States of America, will prevail. Unfortunately, I'm not necessarily convinced. Back in the day, the people of the Roman Empire were confident that their country would always last. The people of the Byzantine Empire were confident that their empire would go on forever. The same is true of the Russian Empire. The same is true of the Soviet Empire. I personally believe the Soviet Union would never end in my lifetime. And they're all gone. America's future, in fact, is far from guaranteed. To me, the public affairs mission calls on the entire Missouri State University community to act on this principle. America's future is, in fact, not guaranteed. To take proper action, we have to understand America's challenges as best we can. And it's my hope that you will find rise and fall of superpowers a means towards that all-important end.